Hi everyone, welcome to the latest episode of Future Work World, your destination for the now and the next of work. It's really great to be here today. I'm your host, Barry Winkless. Now, the first thing I want to talk about is the latest research from our own Future of Work Institute focused on the changing expectations of work and life. And I want to focus in on two things today: leadership and some of our initial findings so far, and then also flexible working, because I know that's been in the press for a while, and particularly with Amazon asking some of their staff to come back and work in an office 5 days a week. So we might start with leadership. And I think some of the really, really interesting findings from our research has been, number one, is that it's a top three reason why people will actually join an organization is the quality of perceived leadership within that organization. And also, I think what's really interesting, it's also a top five as to why people of all ages will actually stay within that organization. So the quality of leadership becomes really important. And when we went a little bit deeper on what actual elements of leadership are important as to why people would stay in an organization, the first was around culture, values, and ethics. So 27 to 28% of the people that responded in our survey highlighted that culture, values, and ethics are extremely important when they were actually looking for a potential employer. The work environment, which includes the physical and the social element of work, was at 24%. And leadership behaviours were well up there, around 23%. So I think what's really, really interesting from a listener perspective is that leadership is a key reason as to why people are actually joining an organisation and why they're staying in an organisation. And that leadership focus should be really around developing a culture and a set of values that mean something to people, that leader really focuses on creating a positive work environment, and that their behaviours really drive proper employee engagement. So I think that's an interesting one from a leadership perspective. And obviously we're going a lot deeper in that research, and we will share more of that research, in other episodes. Just want to talk a little bit around flexibility and flexible work arrangements, or what we talked about in our research. And I think what's really, really important is that after compensation and benefits, all of the different age cohorts now are highlighting flexibility and forms of hybrid working as one of the reasons that they will join an organisation. More than 25% of people won't even consider an organisation that doesn't actually offer some form of flexible working. And we went a little bit deeper then around flexibility, and we asked a number of our participants in the survey, what kind of flexible working arrangements are available to you? About 20% highlighted a hybrid model where people can choose their own days. Other people, around 17%, highlighted flex time, where they can choose their own hours. Seems to be a large number, around 17 to 18%, that have a hybrid way of working, but there are dedicated days set by the organisation in terms of the time that they're in the office. Fully remote, 12 to 13% of people highlight that they are fully remote. And then a number of organisations, interestingly, have introduced concepts like an early Friday finish, or summer hours, or compressed work weeks. All of those coming in around at the 12% mark. So I think what's really, really interesting coming out of that is probably this disconnect between our perceptions around work and around flexibility, and really perceptions from organizations around this drive towards bringing people back into physical space. I think we need to stand back and really understand why we're doing those kind of things, why we're making those kind of decisions, and why it really makes sense for that. My sense from the research that we're doing is that there's a disconnect between leadership perceptions and actually the positive impact that flexible and hybrid working is having on the workforce. So from our research, most people highlighted that it improved their overall efficiency and focus at work. So I'm not fully sure yet as to why leaders are asking people to come back into a much more traditional working environment in a world where we're already working very, very differently to what we did 5 years ago, and also in a world where over 20 to 30% of us are going to be working for ourselves into the future. So changing expectations of work and life, guys. I'll continue to share some of that trend research as we continue to evolve that work. And I should say that that work covers over 2,000 people and over 75 organizations. We will hope to turn that research into a mini documentary, which will be produced by producer here, Giovanni Morales. And looking forward to sharing that information research with you over the next 3 to 4 months. So changing expectations of work and life, lots of really interesting areas, particularly on leadership and flexible working. And now for our interview, I'm excited to introduce Matt Watkinson, author of 3 amazing books: The 10 Principles Behind Great Customer Experiences, The Grid, the master model behind business success, and Mastering Uncertainty. Matt runs a design agency, Methodical, in California. He has also worked as a consultant with some of the world's most respected organizations. He lives in Venice, California, which I'm very jealous about. And he is also, like me, a piano player and a guitarist. Welcome, Matt. Great to see you here today. Matt, I'd like to start with the first question. Can you tell us a little bit about the central ideas behind mastering uncertainty?
Yeah, I suppose in a nutshell, you'd say that our relationship with uncertainty in life and in business is a major determinant of our ability to succeed and thrive in the world that we live in, but that many people aren't really consciously aware of their relationship or understanding of uncertainty, or their attitude towards uncertainty isn't necessarily helpful or conducive, or their relationship with uncertainty is kind of holding them back. So an obvious place to look if you want to accomplish more, get more done, any of those sorts of things, is to shine a light on your relationship with uncertainty and try to improve it. But it's not something that we're really taught how to do. It's not something that's taught in business school. In fact, quite the opposite. Most of the way that business is taught is to kind of assume a degree of certainty and act on the basis of that, which can actually be very unhelpful, especially in a world that we all know is pretty unpredictable and uncertain. So I had to learn about these concepts for myself. It's not like I was born with these great kind of entrepreneurial insights about uncertainty. I had to learn them from myself. I learned them from my co-author Chaba. I learned them from kind of the school of hard knocks of running my own business for 20 years. And then one day it kind of dawned on me, oh, this is a huge topic that most people just don't really understand, or they're acting on incorrect assumptions, and that might really help them if they better understood it.
Yeah, no, it's a really interesting one as well, because I suppose when I think about my own relationship with uncertainty, it's often linked and associated with anxiety, right? And I know Matt, you've gone through the mill as well in terms of creating and building your own business, as have I in various different guises, and I always get that anxious element, when you realize actually I can't control the world, So I think that was the big thing when I read your book for me, was around, oh, okay, we're not shying away from uncertainty. It's actually something that, if we think about it in a different way, it can actually be meaningful to us, and actually we can harness it, right? So I think one of the interesting arguments, so let's call it an argument, perspectives, I think, Matt, that shone out for me in the book was, when we talk about, there's a whole world, right, of business theories and frameworks and structures, and really we could argue that all of those are prescriptive, and they're also really trying to maybe create a false sense of certainty, right? And you call it out really as, ultimately all of these kind of methods and approaches that are trying to be prescriptive, there's something a bit faddish, there's something a little bit wrong about them, right? Can you kind of explain yourself, Matt? Explain yourself on that.
Yeah, sure. Well, look, it's not to say that there's no such thing as a valuable business theory or insight. I think there are, and I think that there are some frameworks and kind of mental scaffoldings that can help you to make better decisions. But when you look at which kind of management approaches or theories or trends kind of make it into the mainstream, you really see that almost all of them, the sales hook is to promise you certainty in an uncertain world. which is not really achievable. There's no amount of data gathering or analysis or strategizing that can expunge the prospect of uncertainty from the environment. That's the first thing. So, what really gets sold is what can be packaged and sold at scale, not necessarily what is most effective. And what also tends to get sold are things that are able to make money for the kind of consulting firms that do these things. And that tends to be anything that involves a kind of large cohort of people who have to crunch the data and analyze all the information. You can't really say, well, we don't know if this is going to work, so let's try it out. It's a bit of a hard sell. The other thing is to mention that in business, really the act of playing the game changes the rules, because value and competition is relative. There's this idea of that every edge basically comes from having a non-consensus worldview, right? If there's no business advantage, just to use a simple example, there's no business advantage to knowing what time the sun will rise, because that information is available to absolutely everybody, right? What you need is some kind of asymmetry. You need to know something that other people don't know. You need to believe something that you know to be correct that everyone else believes to be incorrect. Or you need some oblique or as a non-consensus view of seeing the world or acting or operating. So in that regard, trends only really benefit the initiator and allow the followers to achieve ordinary performance. Right? So if what you're actually trying to do is do better, you need a non-consensus worldview. And that's why, really, when you look at, I mean, even in the length of both of our careers, how many fads and ideas have come and gone. Right? There hasn't been a management doctrine, philosophy, trend, etc., that has been permanent, because they're inherently faddish. All of them are. So yeah, again, they're more about seeking the promise of certainty in an uncertain world, and they're all about, um, frankly, they're often about having somebody else be responsible for your decisions than they are about actually performing very, very well.
Yeah. I suppose, Matt, that kind of brings me to my next question, which is really around, okay, so, if we know that inherently we're dealing with uncertainty and we're leaders trying to, live in this world, how as leaders do we get comfortable? How do we adjust this mindset? Because, I mentioned earlier on, my kind of gut feeling always around uncertainty is just that, it grows slowly but steadily, this anxiety, right? Because you're trying to, on one hand, you're trying to show confidence, you're trying to show confidence to your team. And then the other hand, you're kind of going, actually, I need to, get my head around this whole thing of uncertainty. So how can we as leaders get comfortable around uncertainty? How do we make it something that's part of us?
Well, there's a lot of themes that are kind of tangential or related to uncertainty that I feel are perhaps easier things to tackle. So, the first thing would be to, whether it's by reading the first couple of chapters of the book or just reflecting on your own life experience, just to think about how uncertain things are, right? In your own life. Like, if you think about how many unpredictable events have happened in your life, how many times you formulated a perfect plan and then it all just didn't didn't play out always. Or even if you think about how random it was, how you met your best friend or spouse or business partner or whatever. or you look at the data at how poor we are as a species at predicting events. We're terrible at predicting, for example, which technologies are going to take on, which ones aren't, and all that kind of stuff. The thing that you're going to realize is that the degree of uncertainty that you're exposed to on a daily basis is is huge, and your brain is kind of airbrushing it out, right? Because we don't necessarily like the idea, we find it kind of anxiety inducing. But the first thing is to kind of just come to some kind of acceptance about it. And then I suppose the second thing would be to ask yourself, well, where's my anxiety coming from? Or as a leader, what does this mean for me? And one of the closest topics to it that I think would be a good place to start is your relationship not necessarily with uncertainty, but with the concept of failure, which is, I think, what most people are really more worried about than they are uncertainty. Right. So, of course, nobody wants to fail. Nobody wants to try something and it not work out. Nobody wants any of that. Nobody wants to put a plan together that then kind of craters. But you're less likely to do those things if you're actually aware of uncertainty and act accordingly. Right? So one thing that you can do is, instead of trying to lock in a guaranteed upside, like we want X return on investment, you can allow yourself to experiment by saying, how much could we afford to spend to find out whether this idea works or not? Right? So we turn it from guaranteed ROI to unproblematic, affordable loss. Right? And that puts financial guardrails in place. Of course it does, but it also gives you permission to try things in the knowledge that you don't know what the outcome is going to be. And that then changes everyone's mentality from got to make the numbers work, got to make the plan work, got to give a positive status update, to one of curiosity, one of learning, one of much greater kind of psychological safety, one of widely sharing information, good or bad, rather than just suppressing the bad and the whole news improvement thing kind of happening and going up the hierarchy. So yeah, really it comes down to not just uncertainty, but things like failure, willingness to experiment, encouraging curiosity, and also setting goals that are as much based around learning as they are around performance. Because if all your goals are performance goals, eventually there's going to come a time where you can't hit them for some reason, perhaps that's even beyond your control. If your goals are learning goals, which they should be in a highly uncertain environment, then there's always something to learn, you know. So those are some thought starters, but obviously we go into all of this in far greater detail in the book as well.
Is it, always, Matt, generally it's can be helpful to give examples, I suppose, of people or behaviors, shall we say, that really imbue that, let's call it, being comfortable with uncertainty. Are there any leaders out there that you would highlight as leaders who have seemed to be able to deal with that uncertainty, respond, that have that more experimental mindset, that more learning type approach? Is there anybody that you've come across, even personally, or people out there that, you think represents that type of leader?
Yeah, I think pretty much all of any kind of founder owned large cap company, or that's still under the leadership of the initial founder, that's continuing to grow, will be exhibiting these properties, because this is really the only way that you can do it, is by placing bets, experimenting, doubling down on the things that work and just scrapping the things that don't, and being willing to invest your money in doing that. Probably in most recent times, the leader who's been most vocal about it, because he he wrote about it extensively in his letters to shareholders was Jeff Bezos, who talked about this combination of, I think he called it of some circumstances where you can be very efficient and very deliberate and very kind of strategic and in that kind of operating in that kind of idiom, but then also talking about wandering and the need to place bets and the need to try ideas and the need to just see which would work and give them room to grow and then double down on the successes and take what you learn from the failures and use those to build on. Another leader who always comes to mind for me with this is James Dyson, who I have real admiration for him as an innovator and as an entrepreneur, and look at what he's done. The first product, obviously a bagless vacuum cleaner, against tremendous odds, managed to succeed with that through endless prototyping, and then moving into all of these other adjacencies, and now even into headphones. How do you go from? I think he just figures that, well, we're good at moving air around, we're good at small electronics, we're good at batteries. Let's just keep on going. And they're constantly entering new categories and experimenting with new ideas. Hand dryers, hair dryers, tried a washing machine, that didn't work. And this incredible thing of getting almost all the way to launching an electric vehicle and then realizing at the last minute, we're not going to make this work, and then just scrapping it. Well, we'll take what we learned from that, from however much of his own money he invested in it, but having the courage first of all to try, and then the courage to stop, because most companies, I'm sure, would just launch the product having reached that point anyway. So yeah, there's a guy who is fully at peace with operating under uncertainty and making decisions accordingly, and saying, well, if we've learned something and now we need to change direction. Okay, we've learned something, now we need to change direction, rather than just stubbornly sticking to a plan, whether the plan is right or wrong.
Yeah. I'm just interested, kind of more of a personal question, I suppose. It's, you've obviously gone through everything that it takes to get this book done, make the ideas resonate, etc. When you were writing the book, or by the time you completed it, was there anything that you learned through that process about uncertainty where you went, oh, okay, I'm going to really, I've absorbed that now? It's something maybe unexpected that you maybe didn't think about before you started the book. Was there one thing that you went, oh, okay?
Well, I'd say, Barry, of the three books I've written, this one had the greatest impact on me personally in terms of my outlook and worldview. Like I said, I'm not coming into this topic from a position of kind of being a guru or messiah or anything like that. I learned this for myself the hard way, and I'd already read probably 400 or something business books before I'd even sat down to write this. So I couldn't believe that there wasn't more airtime about this topic. So it really did overall totally transform my way of thinking and operating. I think the biggest thing probably is this idea of just asking yourself, what's my downside? And if your downside is acceptable, then you can try. And that is a really powerful way of reframing opportunity, because most people have the opposite approach, which is, unless I can see a guaranteed upside, I won't try. But if you can change that to what's my downside, and if that's okay, I'll try, whether it's asking someone on a date, applying for a job, taking the first step towards learning a new skill, calling somebody for help, drafting a proposal for a book, you're expanding your scope of opportunity exponentially if you start to think in terms of your downside and controlling that in an uncertain world.
Yeah, really, really interesting. Yeah, you have to say, Matt, it was a bit like that when I read the book as well. I only got to it relatively recently, and for me, it was a bit like, as you said yourself, it was a kind of a fundamental book for me because I started to kind of go, oh, okay, this is actually something. Number one, I need to get my head around. And then number two, if I start thinking about those principles, I like the whole downside concept. It actually starts getting me into that more comfortable zone around uncertainty. So I should say thanks to you and your co-author for that. Matt, I do want to come to your first book, if you don't mind, because it was one of my personal favorites a couple of years ago, The 10 Principles Behind Great Customer Experiences. And
Thank you.
obviously within our Future Work Institute, we do a lot of work around experience in the workplace. And I was really interested in, you just letting the maybe listeners know about that book, about a few of those concepts, because I like the simplicity of this, 10 experience elements, and is there any ones in particular, given what you've learned over the last number of years, is there any of those principles you think are particularly important as it relates to the workplace now? I know things obviously change and things evolve, but I'm kind of, can you talk to us a little about the book, the concepts behind that, and then again, what are that couple of experiential elements now that are important that you believe to leaders in the workplace today?
Yeah, sure. Well, it's first of all, Barry, it's hard to believe that it's been 12 years.
Wow.
Um,
Yeah. I actually can't believe that either. That makes me kind of feel older than I already feel.
it's hard to believe it's been 12 years, and it's hard to, and it's been incredibly gratifying to see the longevity of the ideas and the principles that people still apply them. People still talk about that book. People still buy it. People still want to read it. People still share it. People still reference it. Clients
I
still come
assume,
to
Matt, you
me
remember.
from it.
Yeah, I assume you remember you did a talk to one of our companies. Don't know if you remember that.
I
Was
do
that
remember. Yeah.
5, 6 years ago? Believe it or not.
Yeah. 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 So it's had tremendous longevity, and I think it's because there's something kind of inherently right about
Yeah.
the principles in there, and it's because they're based on the kind of underlying psychology of what it is that we're looking for in the experiences that we have, and that's pretty evidence based. That's what it was. That's what I drew from, and I feel like obviously I've reflected on it over time. I've thought about the book. I've had a ton of feedback from people. I've used them in practice, and the one I would keep the principles the same if I were to rewrite it. But the thing that I would change is I would probably put more emphasis on expectation management, because that's the thing that's just been proven to me, at least, time and time again, to be the shortfall, is people saying one thing and then doing something else, or promising something that they can't deliver, or even just basic expectation setting about here's how it works, here's what's going to happen. And I don't think there's ever a customer experience problem that isn't in some way an expectation problem. Sure, there are things where it feels effortful, but that's only a problem because you expect it to be less effortful, kind of thing. Or even just last week, or this week. Sorry, time is elastic. Even this week, Tuesday morning, woke up in a hotel in somewhere inland in California. It was 5 a.m. I opened my phone. I looked at where was open for coffee. There was a Starbucks nearby. I walked to the Starbucks, which is open at 5 a.m. The door's locked because they open at 6. And it says 5 on the door. I'm like, well, why aren't you open? They're like, oh, well, the drive-through is open at 5, but the store isn't. Like, but it doesn't say that. It says on your door 5 a.m. It says on your website, on your Google listing 5 a.m. So people come here. But that's an easy fix. It's just an expectation issue. But you see them literally everywhere. Once you start realizing that it's nobody's job in a company to make sure that expectations are set and then met accurately along the kind of continuum of interactions, you realize how much opportunity there is, because satisfaction is inherently linked to expectations. Otherwise, you couldn't be happy with McDonald's and like the fat duck couldn't both have satisfied customers if it
Yeah,
wasn't for
yeah,
expectations.
yeah.
So
I'm really glad you
yeah,
brought that one
that's
up,
been
actually, Matt.
a huge
Yeah.
part of it.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you brought that one up, actually, because it's something we see a lot in the Future Work Institute as well. Is you know, if you're telling a story about your organization and all of the elements that are really really great about it, and you've kind of made a big play on that in people during their interview and their induction processes. Make sure you live up to those expectations or don't set them in the first place. And I do think that's it's a huge principle. I think that really resonates with me. Particularly even in the small things, but all the way up to the big things. And when you think about how difficult it is to get the right type of talent into your business in the first place, being very clear that you're authentic about those expectations and they're being met, I think is a really resonant kind of concept on that. But I just want to kind of, I suppose, coming to our last question. We've kind of established the fact that we're living in an inherently uncertain world, and I suppose I wanted to come to you, both as an author and as a, let's call it, a practitioner. What are the 5 words that you would use to sum up what leadership needs to be in this uncertain world? Easy one to end off with, Matt.
5 words.
Yeah, even 3, even 1. I'm just kind of interested in your perspective on it, because you've obviously come at leadership from multiple perspectives through your 3 books, and I'm kind of interested in your take on that.
Yeah, well, look, the underlying concept is pretty simple, that you can't expunge certain uncertainty from the picture. Creating a culture that's where people are fearful of failure is at war with uncertainty. Creating single metric performance goals is at war with uncertainty. Almost everything that bad managers and bad leaders do is at war with uncertainty, right? So if it's got to be 5 words, I'd say embrace uncertainty, act accordingly, please. That's 5 words.
Well done, Matt. That's it. Could be the title of your follow-up book, Matt. I'd like to say thanks very much on behalf of Future Work World and our network, guys. I definitely would say, and I don't say this too often, I definitely recommend you get a copy of Mastering Uncertainty. For me, it's almost like a playbook of how we can deal with and work with uncertainty as leaders. So I definitely recommend that one. And if you do get a chance, pick up Matt's 12-year-old book, which I can't believe, Matt, actually, when you said that, 10 Principles Behind Great Customer Experiences. I think for me, it sets the canvas of what experiential thinking and doing is all about. So, Matt, we'll let you get back, hopefully to bed after an early start for you over there in California. As always, amazing to see you, and hope to hear more from you through your ideas and concepts into the future. Matt Watkinson, thanks very much.
Thank you so much.
Thanks very much, guys, for listening and watching the show today. One thing I will point out is I am speaking in London on the 21st of November at the Richmond HR Forum. So if any of you are listening from London or the area out there, hopefully I'll see you at that event. With that, thanks very much for listening, guys. Thanks to Matt for the interview, and we'll see you soon. Bye.